Hello, and welcome to the latest in our video series on laboratory safety. And many of our other modules on safety have focused on chemicals and how to handle them safely. But today we're looking at a different, but equally important aspect of lab safety. In the lab, biological agents offer different safety challenges. So understanding these unique hazards is important to your safety. There are 4 levels of biocontainment defined by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC. Today we will talk about safe work practices when handling the 2 lowest levels, Biosafety Level 1 and Biosafety Level 2, or BSL-1 and BSL-2 biohazards.
First, let's look at exactly what we mean by biohazards. Biohazards are infectious agents or hazardous biological materials that may present a risk to the health of humans, animals, or the environment. Biohazards are classified by their risk groups. Risk Group 1, biological agents that are not associated with disease in healthy humans. Example, Bacillus subtilis. Risk Group 2, biological agents that are associated with human disease which is rarely serious and for which preventive therapeutic interventions are often available. Example, adenovirus. Risk Group 3 and 4, agents that are associated with serious or lethal human disease, and based on the risk group, preventive therapeutic interventions may not be available. Examples, Bacillus anthracis and ricin. In the lab, we distinguish biohazards from other lab samples by labeling them with this, the Universal Biohazard Symbol. You will find these symbols posted at entrances to laboratories where biological material is handled and on sample containers. Signs should include the name of the agent if required and phone number of the primary researcher. Here you can see samples are labeled with the biohazard symbol. This way everyone in the lab will know that these samples are different and that it should be handled as a biohazard. Because of what they are working on, Chelsea's lab is restricted. Be sure to check on the accessibility in your lab. Lab access may need to be limited or restricted while working with biohazards. Your laboratory director will make this determination. The type of biological material determines the level of containment. The most important element of containment is adherence to good microbiological practices and techniques. Safety focus on methods of containment for managing infectious materials in the lab environment is crucial. There are 2 types of containment, primary and secondary. Primary containment or primary barriers is the protection of lab workers and others in the lab as well as the immediate lab environment. We manage this through the use of standard microbiological practices, proper personal protective equipment, PPE, and appropriate safety equipment such as biosafety cabinets, enclosed biological safety containers, and other engineering controls designed to remove or minimize exposures to biological materials. These biosafety cabinets should be in use when there is a potential to create aerosols. Secondary containment or secondary barriers is the protection of the environment external to the laboratory. This is best handled through laboratory design and construction. With biological agents, it is important to wear appropriate PPE. At the very minimum, you should wear protective eyewear and use a lab coat, gown, or uniform to prevent contamination of your personal clothing. But going beyond that may be necessary. Wear gloves in accordance with the biological and chemical hazards. Even though your skin is a natural barrier to infection, it can be breached. And depending on tasks and the agent used, sometimes it is necessary to use a double layer of gloves. We've mentioned standard microbiological practices a few times. So what are they? These are the basic good lab practices that should be used in your lab when working with any level of biohazard. Let's see how Jamie uses the standard microbiological practices as she works in the lab. Before she starts work, Jamie educates herself about the hazards associated with the agent she is handling. She and everyone in her lab who works with biohazards are well trained and proficient in standard microbiological practices and techniques. And you should be too. Ask for training and consult your lab's specific biosafety manual. It will detail the safe operating procedures defined for your lab and tasks. A unique part of working with biohazards is the use of sharps. These include any instruments that can puncture, cut, or scrape body parts, such as needles, broken glass, and scalpels. If you are working with sharps, follow your lab's safe handling policy. Use a sharps container for disposal. Don't break, bend, resheath, or reuse syringes or needles. Never place sharps in office waste containers. Others could unknowingly poke or cut themselves, exposing them to the agent. And last but not least, don't touch broken glass with your hands.
When pipetting, always use a mechanical pipette. Never mouth the pipette. Biohazards in the lab should never be near or in your mouth.
Clean and decontaminate work surfaces after completion of work and after any spill or splash of biological agents with appropriate disinfectant. It may not seem like a big deal, but with biohazards or any material in the lab, this is a safety must. Handle your biological waste to maintain containment. It sounds silly, but it's important to decontaminate waste before final disposal, using an approved method such as autoclaving or chemical disinfectant. If materials need to be decontaminated in another area, place them in a closed, durable, leak-proof container for transport. Materials being decontaminated at another facility must be packaged according to local, state, and federal regulations. Always wash your hands after removing your gloves and before you leave the laboratory. So now that we've covered the basics for safety in any lab and situations involving biohazards, let's talk specifically about the safe work practices used when handling BSL-1 agents. BSL-1 agents are not known to consistently cause disease in healthy adults. They have minimal potential hazard. If you're working with BSL-1 agents, your lab will manage safety with a basic level of containment, standard microbiological practices, and no special practices. Most tasks completed within a BSL-1 laboratory can be performed safely from the benchtop. Now look around you. Make sure your lab has all of these elements to ensure BSL-1 safety. Doors that control access to the lab, a sink to wash your hands, work surfaces that can be easily cleaned, including around and in between objects, bench tops that are impervious to water and resistant to heat, organic solvents, acids, alkalis, and other chemicals. Windows that open to the exterior should be fitted with screens, and it is never recommended to open windows when working with biological agents. With these in place, you are good to go for BSL-1 lab work. However, more is required when working with BSL-2 agents. These are moderately hazardous agents present in the community and associated with human disease of varying severity. When working with these agents, we build upon the safety procedures of a BSL-1 lab. In all cases, standard microbiological practices are the foundation for handling biohazards safely. Access to BSL-2 labs should be limited or restricted when working with infectious agents. In addition, anyone with an increased risk of infection or where infection could cause serious consequences should be restricted from the laboratory. If special provisions and requirements for lab entry are in place, this should be added to the biohazard warning sign on the lab door. Spills and accidents that result in exposure to infectious agents should be reported immediately. Depending on the agents, blood serum samples may be collected. A method for decontaminating all laboratory waste should be available in the facility. Autoclave, chemical disinfection, incineration, or other validated decontaminated method should be available to decontaminate the waste. First decontaminate and then dispose properly according to lab and governmental regulations. Take a minute to look again. Your lab should have all of these elements to ensure BSL-2 safety. Doors should be self-closing and may require locks in accordance with your institutional policies. A sink for washing hands, and an eye wash in case of contact with your eyes. Class 1 or 2 biosafety cabinets for protection against splashes, aerosols, and large volumes or high concentrations. In addition, your lab needs to meet Biosafety Level 1 requirements.
No matter what type of biological agent or what biosafety level you are working with, handling biohazards safely always starts by using the standard microbiological practices we discussed. You and everyone else in your lab should be well trained about the hazards and safe handling of the agents you are working with. And you should know all the ins and outs of using a biosafety cabinet if it's needed for your project. Training is your first step to safety when working with biohazards in the lab. Many exciting discoveries await you as you work with biological materials. And the best work begins when your bio adventures are always paired with lab biosafety.